Welcome to our class for today. We are taking economics, and in our previous class we discussed the cost concept or the revenue concepts. Under the cost or revenue concepts that we took the other time, we discussed about your fixed costs, your average costs, your marginal costs, and the average marginal cost. Today we are going to look at the curve. We are taking the curve without a schedule. We take an imaginary curve. In our next class, we are going to use an example to solve the cost concept curve or the revenue concept schedule curve. We will use an example. We'll see how we're going to apply each of these formula we've talked about previously and impute it into the formulas, and we'll take the table or the schedule. You'll see how they relate. The marginal curve, the fixed cost, the marginal cost, the average marginal cost, the total marginal cost, how all of them interrelate to give us a schedule. So today, let's take an imaginary curve of each of these cost concepts. Let's look at fixed cost, which is represented by FC. Refer to the last class. I wrote each of these and explained them, then give you the formula. Today we're only taking the curve. Remember that fixed is anything that is stable. For example, fixed assets like land doesn't move, they don't change, they remain in a place, and they are constant. So also in our fixed costs, they are constant, they are fixed, they don't change over time. Whether price change, whether price does not change, whether production change, whether production doesn't change, whether taste change, whether taste does not change, fixed cost doesn't change. So when we talk about fixed cost, it is a cost or expenses that remain unchanged. Whatever the level of output, it remains. If it is 1, it remains 1. If it is 10, it remains 10. It doesn't change. It simply means the cost of an enterprise which does not change with outputs. So, like I told you, it remains, it's constant, it doesn't change. Nothing changes it. So the pictorial or the graphical representation is this. This is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. This is output, and this is cost. And so in fixed asset, you see it's going this horizontal way because it moves on the same horizontal movement. It doesn't change. If it's 10, it's going to be 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. So it doesn't curve. It's in a symmetrical ground. It remains constant. No matter the time, the output, the taste, or whatever, the market doesn't affect how the fixed cost goes. So it's a constant variable that doesn't change. It's stable, it's the same. That's for fixed cost. And fixed cost is calculated by total cost minus variable cost. Refer to our last class. You understand what total cost is and you understand what variable cost is. I am not going to explain that in detail in this class because I have dealt with that in our previous class. And so when we are going to take our schedule, we are going to see how we're going to derive our fixed cost. That it is total cost minus variable cost. Or we can say that total fixed cost is average fixed cost times quantity produced. We will impute it into our formula in our next class when we draw a schedule. Then you will see how it applies. Alright, so this is for fixed costs. Now we go to variable costs. What's the formula? I gave the formula and did the explanation, but I'm taking just the formula and the curve in this class. Now, average cost. When we talk about average cost, is defined as the cost of production which varies or changes directly with the level of output. Changes directly with the level of output. Variable cost has a tendency to rise as more of a commodity is produced and reduced as less of a commodity is produced. Refer to your law of demand. The more the demand, the more the production. The higher the price, the higher the quantity that will be produced. And so that concept comes into play in variable costs. And I said that variable costs varies or increases directly with the level of output. When output increases, variable cost tends to rise as more. And then when the product or the commodity, the price reduces, variable cost diminishes. So what is the pictorial illustration here? Look at it this way. For our variable costs, look at our variable costs. If you look at it here, you see, the more the costs, the higher the output. That's why it moves on this higher ground. So when it starts, at this at this point, price become low, production become low. But the moment price pick up, production increases. So it has this kind of good shape. It has this good shape. So this is the cost of per unit, this is the output, and this is the curve. Remember I said that variable cost, which can also be said to be a direct cost, can be said to be the cost of production which varies or changes directly with the level of output. Variable cost has a tendency to raise as more when commodity is produced and when price is higher. Variable cost reduces as less of the commodity is produced. If the commodity you are producing is less, variable cost reduces. If the commodity you are producing is high and demand is high, variable cost increases. So we have seen variable cost. Now let's look at another area, which is average cost. But remember that variable cost, the mathematical formula to derive is variable cost is equals to total cost minus fixed cost. We've known what our fixed cost is. That fixed cost doesn't change, it remains constant. So when you put that constant figure here, minus your total costs. Refer to our last class, I explained what total cost is. So variable cost is total cost minus fixed cost. That will give us what variable cost is. Now let's go to average cost. When we talk about average cost is divided by average cost is gotten by dividing the total cost by the total number of output produced. Dividing the total cost by the average number produced. Let's take for example that the total cost is 100 and average number produced is 50. And so when you divide this, you are going to have 4. So average cost in this instance is derived by dividing the total cost by the total number of output produced. Now let's look at average cost here. Total cost, which is TC, which is the total number of costs incurred during the production process, divided by total output or total quantity produced. That will give us our average cost. Or we say average total cost is average fixed cost plus average variable cost. So average cost here, which is total cost divided by total output. Average cost can be said to be the cost per unit of output or the total cost of production of a commodity incurred by an organization divided by the number of units of output. How do we represent this graphically or in a curve? Total costs divided by total output. This is our output. This is our total cost. So it takes this L kind of curve. we take this L kind of curve, which is average variable cost. Sorry, this is average variable cost. So if you want to get this in our schedule, we are going to divide total cost. We're going to have total cost divided by total output, the total number of outputs that have been produced. So the total cost incurred during the production process divided by the output gotten from the production process, it's what our average cost is. And it is represented with our imaginary curve with this L form, whereby this is the unit produced and this is the output gotten. Alright, now let's take another of our cost concepts. We have been imputing our total cost in order of our formula that we took. So total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost, or total cost is equals to average total cost times quantity. If we put it in the schedule, it will be clearer. So what is the pictorial or the curve shape of a total cost? This is how it is. Where we have the y-axis, the point of origin, and your x-axis. Here is your total per unit, and here is your output. Remember I told you that fixed costs remain constant. And total cost, it's fixed cost plus variable cost, or we can say it is total cost, which is equals to average total cost times quantity. It will still give us the same answer. Now let's go to average variable costs. The average variable cost can be gotten from total variable cost divided by total quantity. It will give us average total cost minus average fixed cost. Not to worry, we'll impute it in our schedule and we'll see how it applies in our formula. Now, remember that we said average variable cost is equals to total variable cost divided by total quantity. And the pictorial or the schedule or curve is represented by this format: average variable cost. Here is your total unit produced, here is your point of origin when plotting in the graph, and here is your output. Alright, then we go to average fixed cost. Remember that when we discuss fixed cost, we said it's constant. Same way, average fixed cost, we are just going to have a divided by 2 of fixed cost, but it will still remain constant. So total fixed cost is divided by unit of output or unit of quantity. So total average total cost minus average cost give us average fixed cost, and it is constant like we have in our fixed cost. You see the L form of it remains constant. So this is the cost concept. We have seen a number of it. We have seen fixed costs, we've seen variable costs, we've seen total cost, we've seen average cost, we've seen average variable cost. We have equally seen marginal cost. Okay, we are yet to get our marginal cost. So let's look at the last cost concept, which is the marginal cost. Now, marginal cost, which is represented by MC, is change in total cost divided by change in output. This theta sign is change. So it is represented by change in total cost divided by change in output or in quantity. Alright, and when we look at marginal cost, it is the extra cost of increasing output by 1 unit. Increasing cost by 1 unit. So we can say that marginal cost is the cost difference in producing an additional unit of an output. Let's take for example, if A and B produces or buys 20 tubers of yam at 50 naira for one, and it costs 60 naira to produce it. To produce 21 tubers of the same yam, it will cost extra 10 naira. Ordinarily, A and B buys a tuber of yam, or it costs them 50 naira to buy a tuber of yam. And at the end of it all, they added an extra unit. It cost them an extra unit, and instead of buying the tuber of yam for 50 naira, the tuber of yam is bought for 60 naira. Or the cost of producing that yam cost them 60 naira. The additional 10 naira price is a marginal cost because it's an additional unit added to make sure that the production process completes. So it's an additional cost. The cost of 50 naira was not able to carry out the production complete. So they added an additional cost of 10 naira to complete the production cost. So that is marginal cost. Change in total cost divided by change in output. An additional unit of change is what we refer to as marginal cost. So we have seen our fixed cost, our total fixed cost, our average fixed cost, our marginal cost. All of these are under cost concepts. In our next class, we are going to plot it into a schedule to see how this formula interrelates. We have been using it. We might be confused at the point, but when we impute it in our schedule, it's going to be clear. So come along in our next class where we're going to apply all this formula into our schedule, into our mathematical representation, and you see how they interrelate. Thank you for watching the class. Please watch it over and over again. See how these curves are represented, how fixed cost is represented, how average fixed cost is represented, how total cost is represented, how marginal cost is represented. It is very important. In your objective class, they can just draw a curve and say, what curve is this? So master this curve and know how they interrelate. We will see in our next class when we impute all of this formula in our schedule. Thank you for being here. If you've not subscribed, subscribe. If there are people you think would benefit from this class, please, they are welcome. This is not a monologue class, it's a dialogue between you and I. Go below the comment box and ask your question. Suggest whatever you wish to suggest. Thank you for being part of the class. Thank you for being my community. Let's make the community grow and big until I come your way again.